Welcome back to the Female Dating Strategy, the meanest female-only podcast on the internet. I'm your host, Diana.
And I'm Rose, and today we're discussing the perils and pleasures of nostalgia, the ways in which it can conceal and elide experiences that are meant to educate us, and lead us often to fall prey to the same pitfalls from our very past. So let's discuss this, Diana. When you first brought up this topic, what actually led to you landing on this topic? Because you sent it to me midweek, and I was like, yes, this is a brilliant idea. What occurred to you there?
You know what? I kept thinking about how people I know get back with their exes and they romanticize the relationship after they've had a period of distance from them. And actually what made me think about it was, I was visiting another town that I had lived in after a really long time. And when I was staying there, I was feeling really nostalgic for the memories I had in the space when I lived there. But then I realized I was like, oh, you can't ever really go back home. It's never going to be that space. It's changed so much drastically, even for me, that even I don't recognize it anymore, But I was still holding on to this idea I had of it when I lived there. And I was like, well, it's not this town anymore, and it's never been this town maybe, but it's definitely not this town anymore. And I thought about how when I was reflecting, when I was leaving the space and I was, going back to get my flight or whatever, I was like, this is a weird feeling because it's very painful to realize that you could never go back to that space and time ever. Even though it's not really helping you, but you could never go back to that time. And so people latch on to this idea of it was better. And you see this a lot in media as well, right? People are like, oh, the music of our time was better. The fashion of our time was better. Life was just better. I don't deny the fact that pre-internet probably life was, I don't know that it's necessarily better because I feel like people were just as mean and people were bullying.
Absolutely. This is bigoted.
Again, it comes back to nostalgia. People romanticize a time when people were nicer and friendlier and happier and more understanding. And it's well, was that ever the situation? Or is it just that social media has made you a lot more aware of how people aren't like that?
This makes me think about this idea of yearning, even if it's yearning for something that no longer exists. In Portuguese, in Brazil, they have a term for that. They call it saudade. And it means this longing to return to a place that maybe never was, or to a relationship where the person's dead or gone. And just this idea of you're in this perpetual state of sort of dwelling in the twilight. You're neither there nor here, but all of your energy and desire is directed towards something that's never going to be attainable again. And I think that's basically what nostalgia ends up being for a lot of people.
Yeah, because the other aspect of it is I think that when you're not that content with your present, you tend to lean more heavily on a happier make-believe past. And it doesn't matter if the past was actually good or not, because I know a lot of people who romanticize the past even if they didn't, they didn't like it when they were actually living through it, when they were going through a really difficult time. I think with time, our pain is dulled. We just don't remember the pain as clearly as we did, as acutely as we did when we first experienced it. And then what you're left with is memories of a time that felt simpler, maybe was happier, but you're latching on to, essentially, nostalgia really is just hanging on to the past. Not in a way that is useful. I think that people think that, okay, well, what if I'm not ruminating on the bad and it's not I have an inability to let go of the terrible things? It's what if I'm just reminiscing about the good stuff? And I'm like, well, that's fine within reason. If it's oh, I like listening to the music of the time period that I was, a child or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. But when it comes down to, I need to get back with my ex because I remember a time when we were happier in high school, when we were dating, I'm going to be shaking your head. You know what I mean? I'm going to be shaking your shoulders and being what the fuck is wrong with you? This is bad.
I just had my childhood best friend, my K through 12 best friend visit. One of her children was here in my area for a sports conference. And I said, why don't you come stay with me? And I didn't know it at the time, but she and her husband were coming. Actually, I've known her longer. But he came into our lives when they were 17. We're all the same age, right? And they've been together ever since. And it's one of the most miserable relationships I've ever seen in my life. And I've had a lot of friends. And I've said to her, what is it that has you holding on to this? And she's like, oh, I just can't imagine not being married to him. And we've just been together for so long. And nothing as far as I love him for XYZ reasons, or he's my reason for getting up in the morning, or he's somebody who's my rock. It's just he's all I've ever known. And I'd rather dwell in misery with that than chance the unknown. And I think that's kind of the bifurcation between those who have an unhealthy attachment to nostalgia versus those who can maybe dip their toes into it from time to time. But again, I think it's about where we put our energy because, like you, if I go back last summer, I went back to my hometown. What's crazy about where I'm from, Diana, is that it hasn't changed. Like you're saying, you went back and you couldn't even recognize it. It had changed so much. Literally, where I'm from, nothing has changed. It's like a time capsule. It's insane. And when I'm there, a part of me is like, oh, I loved how simple it was. Like, there's no traffic. It's so quiet because nobody lives there. Like, the library is really good. When I go into the only gas station in town, like, I always get a friendly hello. I'm always saying hi to the neighbors. They still remember me, even though I haven't lived there since 1999. That's how small that place is. Like, and I'm still recognized when I go into the bar, the one bar we have. And it's all too easy for me to kind of dwell in that. Wasn't it so easy and simple? And then what ends up happening is because it's a small town, they'll ask me about my brother or they'll ask me about my dad. And all of a sudden, like all of this trauma rushes back in. And I'm reminded, like, there is a reason I went very far away and never came back. And so I do understand that pull. I really do. At the same time, I think because I have like this CPTSD sort of thing, my trauma was so acute that I've never been able to forget it. But this is something we also mentioned in the pre-talk. Like, there's a reason why you tend to romanticize the past. It's because your brain literally doesn't want you to recall painful events. It wants to erase them from your memory because it's so damaging to your body. So typically it tries to like overwrite those super traumatic things, unless of course you get, some sort of complex trauma. But typically that's why your brain remembers the happier things versus the non-happy things, because that's a defense mechanism of the brain.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think another aspect of it is that people have an aversion to change. When you're talking about your friend, right? And like, oh, this is all I've ever known. Change seems scarier. Like she's with this person that she knows is not good for her because it feels comfortable. And that's the thing about nostalgia, right? It's like romanticizing a simpler time is comfortable. It's even flattening your experience of the time because really, truly, if you pay attention to your life at all, you know that even back then, there were challenges. But you tend to overlook those challenges because they're not your current problems. You're so fixated on your current problems. You're like, this is such shit that going back to the past feels much nicer, much simpler. I can handle that now. Well, of course you can, because now you're grown. You're more grown and more evolved than you were back then. So of course you can handle the challenges that life threw at you back then. But it's your inability to want to deal with change now. That's the issue.
The inability to not want to change now and using nostalgia is basically escapism. It's another form of escapism, right? You just simply can't bear where you're at right now. And it's easier. And it's this sort of fantasizing that lets you remove yourself from the troubles of today because they are so overwhelming. I mean, especially like you said, was it better before the internet or was it just, same thing, different story? Like, was it just the same but different? Probably. Like, I don't think humans have changed that much. I can't imagine that it's really that different. We just have a lot more access to sort of behavioral on a mass scale because of all the interfaces we have with social media.
Yep. And social media manufactures this as like a constant trend, right? Like it feeds off of this feeling.
Trad wife.
Yeah.
Trad wifery, right? That's all about this sort of nostalgia for a time when women couldn't vote or even have a bank account. But wasn't it so great that they could bake bread at home for their babies?
So simple. Life was so simple back then when you had 16 children.
Right? And your husband could rape or beat you and it didn't matter. Not that it matters that much. I mean, legally speaking, it's not like there's that many things in place today that are so different from before. You know what I'm saying? And so that's when I really start to get hot under the collar because so many of these women are saying, like, I think the times were better before women could vote. Ever since women have been able to vote, look at how much worse off the world is. It's like, I don't care whether women can vote or not. All the people who are still in power are still men. So if you want to be pointing any fingers, please don't be pointing it at women, quote unquote, voting for the wrong person or the wrong policy. What the fuck?
Yeah. And it's funny. I just think about this memory I had from the days of the forum on FDS. So like, a few years ago, I was going through, obviously, just like many people, really rough time in my career because of COVID. My industry, like a lot of industries, were shut down. And I, was trying to find work and it was like very early in my career, essentially. And I was like, okay, what the fuck do I do? My life is not going great. I came with all these plans and all these plans were thrown out of the window. And now what the fuck do I do? And that's kind of how I found the forum, right? Because I was in that space where I was like, well, nothing fulfilling is going on in my life, so let me fill it up with dating and boys. And I quickly found out that that was a very dumb thing to do. And I spent a lot of time being miserable because of it. And when I found the forum, I was reading all these stories. And I remember I started feeling extremely nostalgic about a boyfriend I had in high school. Okay. And the only reason why was because at that time, his career was going great. Like he was in the news, he had a very high profile career. He went to like an Ivy League school. Like he was basically like what I wanted to be. You know what I mean? Bear in mind that like when we broke up many, 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 many years ago, like it was not on the best of terms. Like we had a fine relationship, but towards the end, it was like he was kind of a dick. And so I was like, okay, the way that we ended this relationship, like I don't really want to keep in touch with him because he used to keep in touch with me just to like tell me what was going on with like a new woman. And I was just like, okay, this guy just wants to like prove to me that he's so awesome or whatever. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I have a question for you. Was it Savannah who said this, or am I misremembering? Or maybe it's Shellen Lester who was like, do you really like him? Or do you like the life he's made for himself? And that's what's attracting you to him.
Yep. Well, that was it for me because the thing is, so basically, after our breakup, I never bothered hitting him up because I tried to do the whole let's stay friends thing because I was very young and I was stupid.
I was going to say you're a high schooler, of course.
Yeah, I mean, no, but I mean, at the time when I was like, let's stay friends, I was much older than that. I was like in college or whatever. But like,
Okay.
I was like, let's stay friends. And like, I was like very naive and stupid. And like I said, it was very hard to stay friends with him because he only wanted to like essentially rub it in my face that he was going out with other new people. And I was like, okay, this guy doesn't really want to be a friend. Like, he's bitter about the fact that I broke up with him.
He's a frenemy, is what he is.
But yeah, we're never going to be friends. And so, like, over the years, I just removed him from everything because I was like, well, there's no point. I don't keep in touch with this person and I don't want these memories. Like, I had a lot more clarity when I was younger than I was at that stage when I was like during COVID. You know what I mean? Because I knew I was like, this is not who I wanted in my life. Because when I really needed them to be there, they were not there. And I had other ex boyfriends who were like a lot more present, who were actually friendly people, who had like the appropriate level of distance, were also kind and gentle in their dealings with me. So anyway, like as time moves on, I haven't kept in touch with this guy for years. I don't have him on any social media, like, obviously no contact whatsoever. And then out of nowhere, I started feeling a lot of nostalgia for our relationship, which was crazy because I never felt like that before, right? I had a period of insanity, listeners. It happens because I can tell you exactly why with so much clarity now is because my life was not going that well. And so seeing how successful he was becoming, seeing how successful his life was, the fact that he did all these things that I wanted to do, I was envious of him. And like the only reason I wanted to get back in touch with him was not because I was like, oh, I hope he'll take me back and I hope we can become an item again. Because again, I was like, we're such different people now that likelihood of us actually getting along is even slimmer. But because I didn't feel sorted in my own life, I felt out of sorts. And he seemed like he had his life together. And I remember I went to the forum and I was like, do you think I should start up this conversation with him again? Like, what if we're different people and we're more compatible now? And the FTS community. You can imagine what the FTS community had to say about that.
I love that you actually posted it to the forum. That's what I really miss about it. It was like you would get immediate answers.
More like an immediate resounding reality check, right? Because I was just like, what if I just did this? Also, bear in mind, I knew it was stupid. But I needed to hear it. You know what I mean? I knew it was stupid. Even in my heart of hearts, I knew it was stupid. I knew why I was doing it. And that's the thing. Somebody clocked it almost immediately. They were like, are you actually missing him? And do you actually want to get back with him? Or is it just his life is going so well, your life is shit right now? And so you want him back for that reason alone? Because you've never expressed this interest in like more than a decade that it's been. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's been more than a decade since you've had this second thought, like maybe take a step back. But something I wanted to just point out to you, like you said, like, oh, I was much older when I started like in college. Honestly, from what I've seen from the trends of the decades as I passed through them, it's like teens and 20s, girls into womanhood all tend to try to toe the line of like, we can still be friends, whether it's from not being able to be assertive or, not having that sense of self to kind of stand your ground and say, this is it. I don't want to hear from you anymore. Like you're no longer in my life, period. I think by the time you get to late 20s, early 30s, by then you might have had like one adult relationship that crashed and burned, where it was so painful that you didn't want anything to do with them. So I think by the time you get into your 30s, that's when you're like, we're never going to be friends. So I don't think it's fair to younger you or any of the younger ladies who might be listening. Like, don't beat yourself up. Also learn from us and quit that shit. Like, they're no friend of yours. Okay. Let me just put it that way. You may be a friend to them. They're no friend of yours. And they rely on that.
Also, at that time, our social circles were still very similar. You know, as you get older, you start becoming a lot more intentional about your social circle. Like, there's a lot of friends I have now, and I had this conversation with my friend just yesterday, being like, would I have still been friends with them if I had met them older at a different stage of life? And I was like, well, when I met them, I was definitely a lot more open because I was a lot younger. But the fact that we still stayed friends has more to do with the fact that we still have compatible values. Because I've made a lot of friends from, you know, my late teens, early 20s who didn't make it because we didn't have similar values as time went on. And when you're younger, honestly, these things don't matter because it's like, oh, just as long as Josh has a car and just as long as we can get into the frat house, you know what I mean? Like, your priorities are like, can I drink this weekend, and like, can I go party, and does this person have like nice hookups or whatever? Like, can they hook me up with something real fun? But as you get older, like, that becomes less and less and less important, and you can curate what you want to experience and where you want to go out because you have money, and you can choose to be friends with who you want to be friends with because, again, you have money. You're not, like, you know, dependent on the good graces of other people. And that's what I mean. You romanticize that as well.
You romanticize the circumstances. Like, you know, when people talk about, like, this is a classic trope in American cinema, like the washed up jock reminiscing about the good old days in high school, the glory days, right? Glory days. Literally, songs are written about it. And it's so true that, like, high school was, you know, the high tide for so many. And then afterwards, well, I think it's because, you know, back then the friends that they had, they were very simple friendships. They were friendships of circumstance, and they were friendships of close proximity where, like, you had to see them every day because that's what your day consisted of. As you get older, post college, whether it's work friends or, you know, hobby friends or friends from your friends' friends, etc., like, you have so many more different circles to choose from, which means, of course, you have to be more selective because there's only so much time in a day. But I think that's a huge part of why people romanticize the past, is they remember these friendships that were so pure and so wonderful. And it's like, well, yeah, before you had a mortgage and a 2-year-old and, you know, a 50-hour-a-week job, like, I'm sure hanging out with Josh and Jenny was a blast because you had nothing better to do, you know? You were just trying to while away the time.
Yep. And that's the other thing. Like, another red flag I find in men when I date them, like, just to bring up the nostalgia thing with them, is I'm really wary of men whose entire social circle is still their friends from high school.
Well, it's ironic that you say that, Diana, because, you know, I have 2 brothers. Everybody's older than I am. And like I said, my whole family's trash. Like, I'm no shame. It's just simply we're super dysfunctional and we're just very fractured. And this is generational trauma that we're working through, or I'm working through it. And so I have one brother who I call him the best of the worst. He's the only one I actually still talk to. We have somewhat of a relationship, although he lives overseas. So I see him like once every 2-3 years. That's probably also why we get along well. But the brother who lives closer, who's still in my home state, he has never made, I mean, he'll like have work acquaintances, but he literally only ever hangs out with his high school. I mean, they've been friends since elementary school. And those are the only ones he wants to hang out with. And they're basically his like family, you know? Because he doesn't actually like his family, which I get it because I don't like him either. But as I've gotten older, I've really started to notice like how retrograde, how immature, how base their friendships are. It's not like they're like really warm and welcoming and loving. It's a lot of like, you know, the guys where they're giving each other a hard time. They're insulting, like they talk about sports or like the kids' education, but it's always just very surface level stuff. And I'm like, I'm glad you have a friend who's there for you, but at the same time, like, are you growing at all in this friendship, or is it just like stasis at this point?
No, I think a lot of men get comfortable with that as well because, like, in my observations, right, of like the men that I went to high school with, when we graduated, I remember them saying something like, well, the boys will stay in touch because we're just closer than the girls are. And I remember I was like thinking at that time, I was like, are y'all closer, or is it just that you enable each other more and like nobody else in life is going to do that for you, right? Because you meet people from a different time period and they're not going to put up with the same bullshit that like the people that you knew from high school are going to necessarily, you know? And that's the thing. It was like they would regress back into high school when I would like catch them in like reunions or hangouts and stuff like in the early days. Like now I don't go to these things anymore because I can't stand them. But when I used to meet them, it was like they would recreate the dynamics of how things were in high school. So like the popular high school jock guy gets to feel like the popular high school jock guy again. And like his minions, like they all behave like his minions. And it's like these are 30-something-year-old adults or 40-something-year-old adults. And like they're behaving like they were when they were 16. You know what I mean? And it's like still making the same jokes. Like men are so hierarchy coded, it's like wild. Like it's like they can't survive anywhere without knowing, okay, who's the alpha? Oh, okay, who's this beta? You know what I mean? It's like the entire dynamic is screaming that it's like not a collaborative friendship at all. It's not a friendship that's evolved with time. Like these are guys who go on holidays with each other. These are guys who are like, they don't have any friends from work. They don't have any friends from college. They just have each other. And I'm like, how can you still have just this friend group? Like they may have made like one or two friends from college, but that group also knows the people from the school. Like they're all like just one ginormous hangout group. And like they go on holidays and shit together. And they're like, oh, we're just closer. And it's like, no, you have an inability to let go.
That's crazy because actually that brother and all of his elementary to high school friends, they all go to the same lake resort every summer with their families so they can vacation together. And I'm always like, what? Every year the same place?
Exactly. See, look, it's not that there's anything wrong with having a friend that you've known a really long time. But just like if your entire social circle is just that, then I start to question you. Because I have a couple of friends from high school. Like the friend group I had in high school are not even the friend group I'm friends with anymore because we evolved and we grew and we were no longer compatible. And that's just life. It's not like there was nothing dramatic behind it. We just weren't the same people. But like the friends that I still have who are from the school days, like we weren't even friends at school. We were friends after. You know what I mean? Like we just became friends by the circumstances of time and because we had similar life experiences and like we started to understand each other as we evolved and grew. And so I can imagine that with those people, I would have been friends with them even if I hadn't met them in the circumstance of school, because we shared similar values. With a lot of the men, it's like I still feel like a lot of their friendships are very circumstantial. It's not with intention. It's not like I chose Danny because Danny is a sweet guy and he's nice and he looks after his wife and like he also plays a mean game of catch or whatever. I don't know. Men's reasons for befriending other men is always baffling to me. Like I don't think I'll ever understand that,
I don't. I'm like, you don't even like to hug each other. Like, and I'm not saying you have to be a hugger, but like for me, I don't understand why I have relationships with people if there isn't this love and respect and, this amity between us. Like, otherwise, you're just a regular person in the world that I have to deal with. You're not my friend at that point. You're simply an acquaintance or something less.
Or a friendly acquaintance.
Like a neighbor, that's fine too. Like, we don't need to be friends with everybody. But younger Rose would have had a really hard time with that. So thinking about how things are often with, we look at the past with rose-colored glasses for a variety of reasons. And I think it's become a huge part of marketing as well as like marketing has saturated the market and is now like on every single ad on YouTube and in all of your social medias. I mean, it's just like when I remember how the internet was back when it first started, there was no advertising on the internet. I feel so bad for the youngins who have never known this world of like internet without advertising. It was amazing. It was just the information you wanted or looked up. And maybe it wasn't like the hugest, algorithm as far as getting you all the information you wanted, but like you weren't being bombarded by these pop-ups and these noises. And, it's such an attention economy. And I think that's a key part of marketing's strategy in getting people's attention and getting them to want to buy things is using nostalgia as a marketing technique.
Yep. And they know that, right? They know that like people understand on some level that, yeah, there are aspects of human life now that are much harder and much worse. And like, why not manufacture and sell this back to people as like, oh, trendy Y2K, 90s supermodel era, micro trends. And it's very distracting because, again, it's back into overconsumption, right? They just want you to consume to recreate the same emotion and the same feeling. And it'd be like, well, if you buy our toasted lipstick, you'll probably feel like Cindy Crawford and go be transported back into the 90s.
Back to the 90s, right? I mean, yeah, I'm even thinking about how oftentimes, like cars will do vintage editions of like, I don't know, a Corvette, or they just redid the Bronco car, the Ford Bronco in America, to reimagine how a 70s Bronco would look today, if that makes sense. Like updating the same prototype just to look a little more modern, but it had to have the look of the old one. And I'm just like, what is the point of all this though? And of course it's to sell. And then they've been all over the streets. I've been seeing them more and more because like people love this element of nostalgia. Like, oh, car design used to be so much better. Maybe some things were better, but you know what? A lot more people died in car accidents back then because the safety features weren't involved. So like, I'll take my brand new car, over like a 1970 Mercedes, although I would love a diesel Mercedes from the 70s, but don't get me started. Okay. The point is, so many of the things that we look back on with fondness, it's an incomplete vision and remembrance.
Yep. And you know what else is really insidious? How nostalgia gets you to look at like old photos of yourself from the past and compare them with how you look now in your full grown adult body. and like how you convince yourself. Like, I think the person who really made me think about this was Selena Gomez, and how people kind of talk about what she looked like 10 years ago versus what she looks like now. And of course, she's still a beautiful woman now. But last year, especially, people gave her a lot of shit because, for the listeners who don't know much about Selena Gomez, she's a musician and she's an actor. And she also battles lupus. And part of the side effects of lupus is that there's a lot of weight fluctuation. You go up and down a lot in terms of weight. And people gave her a really hard time last year for putting on weight. And this year, it seems like she's lost some of it because, that's the nature of the illness, right? It like goes up and down. But people keep comparing her with what she looked like when she was basically a newly minted 20 something.
Because she's just 30 now. She's 30 years old. Can you imagine your body between 20 and 30? It's not the same body. Hormones have made its changes.
No. But that's the thing, right? That's another thing that nostalgia does. It makes you look at these old Tumblr photos of yourself and like all these old pictures of yourself from your MySpace days. And like you look at like this very young form of you, like not, again, incompatible with who you are now. Things have changed so drastically. But it's like, oh, I'm never going to be as pretty as I was when I was a teen. Oh my God. Like, how have we reached that stage of humanity that we're getting women to compete with not just younger versions of other women, but younger versions of themselves and like feeling like they're not enough?
It's an AI nightmare. And actually, what you're reminding me of is like, you're reminding me of how so much of like men's desires for women center around these completely unrealistic and unattainable standards where like a 35-year-old is supposed to look like a 22-year-old. Or they use that to justify, well, like girls are so much hotter when they're younger. Like, look at pictures from when you were younger. Like you were so much hotter then. It's like, dude, you have had your brain rotted by porn. If you cannot see a woman who's your age as beautiful in any form, everybody's a beautiful, okay? But if you are attracted to her now, there's no reason why who she is now wouldn't be the same sort of attractiveness before. And also, that's just simply a time in life that has passed. That person no longer exists. So, like, why are you asking for the literal impossible? And why do we like strive to fulfill that? I mean, this whole rise of Botox face, preventative Botox, fillers, what the fuck? Oh my God.
Yep. Like the fact that Ozempic blew up so much in the last year was also wild. Like Ozempic became like the number one drug for everyone. Now, is again, if you struggle with obesity and your doctors recommended it for you, that's a different matter, right? But the fact that everybody's chasing it to be skinny, like that's the other thing. Porn was bad enough, but I think that the way of AI is going to make it so like very few men are attracted to women at all. Because there's a lot of AI features now that are like, design your perfect woman. She'll behave exactly the way you want. She'll look exactly the way you want. And then generate porn with this AI actor. And then you never have to live in the real world anymore. It's like an episode of Black Mirror.
That sounds like Black Mirror. Although I've never actually watched it, but from hearing about it, it's like, that sounds like a literal nightmare fuel.
Yep, that's what it is.
And also, like, I'll never understand it. And I can like go into sociological treatises and anthropology. There's so much that I've read and learned. But like, I will never understand, and I will continue to always abhor this obsession men have with trying to control how women look and behave. Like, why don't you just mind your own business, sir? Why don't you attend to yourself and mind your business?
And that's the thing, that they also make it seem like, oh, being attracted to a woman when she's very, very young is normal. And that's like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, I'm a 50-something-year-old man. And I remember, oh my God, there was this guy on Instagram recently that got roasted by his comment section because he was like, it's so hard for me to date as a 50-something-year-old man. And it's like, are you trying to date other 50-something-year-old women? Are you trying to date people in their 20s? Okay. And there was a guy who stitched him or something, and he was like, it's not that hard when you're dating women your own age. Are you trying to compete with 20-something and 30-something-year-old men for 20-something-year-old women? Then yes, right. You're going to struggle. I think too many men buy into the bullshit of like, you age like fine wine and you have all your money and like all
fox.
all these girls right out of high school will just want to be with you.
That's a fantasy they feed to like, the dregs of society to like keep them slaving forward towards a future that they'll never be able to earn, which is once, they've got their retirement fund and their paunchy belly, they're going to be hotter than all these other 20 and 30-something-year-olds who, have a fraction of his wealth, but who are actually attractive to these young women, right? Like, it's so delulu. I want us to have more of that kind of delusional sense of self because they certainly do. And we actually come much closer to it. Like, we all know how women take care of ourselves. We all know we tend to age gracefully. We work out, we go to the doctor, we get our hormones checked. Like, we take the meds that we're supposed to take when we need to take them. Women are known for this in the medical field. Like, there have been various studies done. about medical compliance versus non-compliance gendered wise, right? And like men die all the time if they don't have wives, because wives will often force their husbands to go to the doctor and get things diagnosed like, an imminent heart attack, or, they're in danger of stroke because of high blood pressure. Like they get this shit taken care of. Whereas men who don't marry or who are no longer married at older ages, they tend to drop out of easily preventable things because they literally refuse to go to the doctor and take care of themselves. So this delusion, ladies, like, can we start to be more delusional about things? Like, I think we need to be more delusional about our now and our future. And I think we need to like put down the past. That's what I think we're talking about today, Diana. I think it's like our ego is so attached to past events, we cannot dwell in the here and now. And we're missing out on so much.
And that's the thing, is like, if you're able to attach this much optimism to the past, why can't you attach this much optimism to your future?
Wait, I need you to repeat that. That was such a fucking golden nugget of wisdom.
Well, if you can attribute this much optimism to the past, why can't you do this with your future? Why can't you also express similar, like, that's the thing, right? People are like, it's never going to get better. Well, not with that attitude.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
I know. Nobody ever succeeded who was like, well, I guess that's the best it ever got, and then just sat there.
Also, is this idea that like in the past, they didn't have things that they were doom and gloom about. I mean, like at every stage of human history, there's been something that human beings have been panicking about. Y2K.
Nuclear, Cold War.
Yeah. When 9/11 happened, like
World
different kinds of wars,
wars.
World War. Yeah, like every generation has had to deal with something that was like, well, what if life never gets better? What if it's shit? You think all of those like English people living in London in like little shelters while their city was being bombed were like, oh my God, life is never going to get better. You think that they didn't think that too? Like people who've been through like actual hardship are trying to find a nugget of optimism with which to, because that's the human spirit. It's enduring, right? You have to have some kind of hope about your future if you want to make it work. Again, you are investing all of your resources, all of your finite energy, all of your, I believe that things can get better, to the wrong period in time. What would focusing on the past and romanticizing and being optimistic about the past do for your present or your future? Nothing. It does nothing. It doesn't change your current reality, and it's not going to do anything for your future either.
Mm-hmm. I think about it like investing, which I've been slowly getting into, and I'm always preaching about like financial wealth and independence for women. So I'm like, oh, I guess I better take my own advice. But one thing I use investing principles in my own life is to be like, well, if I would invest all this time that I spend and all this mental energy and all of this emotional energy, if I take that from dwelling on the past and things that are literally unchangeable and never able to be attained again, right? Like it's a dream, it's a fantasy, it's done, it's not going to happen. If I can take that investment and move it to now in the future, like that's where it'll pay dividends. But if I'm investing it all in the past, like it's going into a black hole and I'm actually detracting from future potentials because I refuse to actually move my investments to where it can yield fruit, so to speak.
Yep. That's why this episode is focused on why even reminiscing about the past in a good way is not helpful to you. Because we know when you sit and ruminate about all the bad shit that went on to you in life, and you're like, oh, my life is never going to get better. My life has been a shit show. Like, it's been one bad thing after another. We know that that attitude is not helpful. We don't need to tell you that because you know that as well, right? But people don't realize how being stuck in the past of like, oh, everything was so much better then, and like things were good, and oh my God, I'm stuck with all these like positive memories. That's not helping you either, because being rooted in your current reality, that's what's going to get you into a better future. Being fixated on everything was so much better then, and like, I miss it so much. This is not a helpful way to look at life at all. See, it's one thing to honor your experiences and be like, you know what, I'm so grateful for these experiences I've had. I'm so grateful for the people who were there, who shared that time with me. I'm so grateful for what they've done in my life. Like, gratitude is not what we're diminishing here. You know what I mean? We're not trying to say you shouldn't be grateful for good things that have happened. But the ability to move on from that is going to be important. Because, well, a lot of people talk about maturity, right? It's like, oh, I'm super mature because I'm still in touch with my ex, and like, we have a really good relationship, and I'm so grateful for him for that time period in my life where he looked after me when my mom was sick or whatever, whatever. They make up some reason and they're like, okay, this guy was a great person for doing what is essentially expected of him. And we're supposed to be like, oh my God, wow, you should totally get back with him. Seems like he's such a wonderful guy. No, it has nothing to do with maturity. It has everything to do with the fact that you have an inability to move on.
Right.
You have an inability to move on and let go. And you need to start evaluating whether that is holding you back from embracing your fullest potential, from being the baddie you were meant to be.
That's right. And I really enjoy how you phrase things, Diana, because one thing I was thinking about was, when my friends get to really know me, they're always shocked at how bad it was for me growing up. Like when I start to drop some of my anecdotes about my family and my childhood, they're like, what? Like they're horrified, which is why I don't often drop a lot of those things in early phases of acquaintanceship and even into the friendship, because that's not who I am now. That was my past, right? But they're like, why don't you go home for Christmas? And I'm like, well, let me tell you about the last Christmas I was home. And then I'll tell them, they're like, oh my God, that's your family? Like, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I'm like, I know, who needs enemies with family like this, right? They're like, okay, so they've really started to understand. This is all saying, when I actually let people see some of the background from which I come, like they cannot understand or believe that I'm as like happy natured as I am. They're like, how did you come from that? And it's like, well, because I've always been a very grateful person. Okay. I've always practiced gratitude. And I also had my oldest sibling is a sister. We both had, pretty similar upbringings. We both had like, when we compare memories, it's not like she was living in this fantasy world of like everything was great and it wasn't for me. We have very similar experiences when we share them. But this is a woman who has only ever dwelled on all the ways in which she's been wronged in her life. And she has never gone on to do anything with herself. And I think she's like 50 something now. I haven't talked to her in the last couple of years.
Oh God, I know people like that. It's terrifying to think that they're still like that when they get older.
They are. Like her envy and her bitterness and her like rage finally drove me away after our last living parent died. I was like, you know what? All this does is literally weigh my soul down with sadness and terror. Like that's all you bring to my life. I call her like a stalker ex-boyfriend who just never leaves me alone because she's obsessed with me because she thinks I live the life that she should have had.
And that's the thing, right? Like that can happen with friends too, because I had a friend who was very similar to that. And like, that's the thing, when you're miserable in life, the automatic assumption is to latch on to somebody who's doing a lot better. And the thing is, they never make you happier. I've been on both ends of this. I've been both the person who's like, oh my God, I really envy this person and I want to have their life. And at the same time, I've also been the person who's the object of envy. And in both situations, I've been like, oh my God, this is an unhealthy way to be. This is not going to get me anywhere in life. It's wild. Like I realized that with time, I was like, anybody who's like this is someone I should avoid as well. Because having been that person myself, I'm like, I was not good company back then.
Right.
I was a person who had a lot of envy and hatred in my heart, and I was upset with my life circumstances. And I was not, a particularly good friend in that time period. And the person I met who was like this as well is like, they were miserable and they were envious of me because I was making moves to ascend. And that's the thing, right? Like people have to understand that just because you are on a path to glowing up and you've taken the decision that like, I don't want to be in this like low vibrational energy anymore. I want to actually make some moves in my life and I want to ascend. I want to get better. I want to evolve. I want to do more with my life. Not everybody is going to be happy for you. And you have to watch out for the people who aren't, because those are the friends that you're going to have to cull, unfortunately, because they're not going to be able to be happy for you. Like anybody who's like, well, I think I'm not that smart. I think I'm not that beautiful. I don't think I'm doing much in life. Eventually that's going to be like, you think I'm not that smart, because they're projecting. They're projecting a lot of their own uncertainty and fears and anger on you. So you have to be careful and you have to make sure that you befriend people and you surround yourself with people who are on the same level, who are trying to also improve their life. Like they don't have to be identical to you, but they have to have that drive in common with you. The desire to improve their circumstances, not feeling satisfied with the bare minimum. That's a very hard thing to find in other people.
It really is, like not just wallowing in sort of the stew of their life and all of their recriminations and regrets and like, bitterness, and going onto Facebook and Instagram to like look at their exes and being like, oh, look at how happy he is now. I don't know why I ever broke up with him. And it's like, oh my God, and I understand because, prior to my relationship and work with my therapist, old Rose was very much like that. Although if you look back on my life, it's a pretty glamorous life, but that wasn't how I felt. I couldn't be content in my life because I was always looking and comparing. Right. And one thing that my therapist told me that, has become one of my mantras is comparison is the thief of joy. Comparing yourself to others will literally steal the joy from you, from your heart. And I think, joy and lightness of heart is one of the most valuable intangibles that we can have in this world. because that's something that I've kept cultivating and kept cultivating. And like, it's uncanny. I can just be out and about doing nothing. And the way people treat me and the way they come up to me, or a worker wants to like offer me this or that. I mean, I'm not doing anything other than simply existing, but people are drawn to vibrations, man. People like the vibe. And so that's something else you have to think about. If you're like spending all this time and energy looking to the past and looking at who you were, like all you're doing is hollowing out the current person and the current soul that you have, because you're not nourishing it with what's here and now and with what's going to keep propelling you forward.
Also, you have to be careful about the energy that you cultivate as well, because like attracts like.
Ooh, yeah.
That's the other thing as well, right? When I look back at that time period of my life when I was not doing well and I was miserable, I was attracting exactly the sort of friendships that I'd have to spend time getting rid of when I was getting better. Because at the time, it was very easy for someone who was also insecure to be my friend. Because on some level, they were kind of secret haters. They were secret haters, right? Like they were like, oh, her life's not going well. And like, it was very easy to be my friend and be like, oh my God, things will get better for you. But the truth is they didn't want that.
Yeah.
Because when my life did start getting better, because again, I wasn't in that phase forever, right? Once I had my head straight and once I had a little time with my emotions, and I was like, well, this is not helpful. And that's the thing, right? Like everybody has a flop era. I would like to think that through our lives, we're probably going to go through multiple, and each one is going to be crucial to our development, right? And so that was my development stage. I wouldn't even call it my healing era. That was like my development stage where I was like, okay, I need to reassess what kind of person I want to be and who I am. And when I started reassessing it, I was like, okay, let's start taking more chances. Let's start making more moves. Let's start doing things differently. Those same friends didn't want to stay friends. And they were envious and they were like, sabotaging, because they realized, they were like, wow, this person is going to leave us behind. And that's the thing. People who are in that position who don't want to do anything about it recognize the reality that they might get left behind. And so they try to pick people who they don't think have a lot of chances to actually move up in life. That's why they selected you. But when you start changing up on them and you start showing that, hey, I'm actually capable of change, they're going to be like upset about it. They're not going to be happy about it, because it means that you're going to leave them behind too. And that's the thing, right? It's like that was a stage of my life where I started realizing I got to be very, very conscious and awake when I'm making friends. Like I got to vet them with the same seriousness with which I vet a potential romantic partner, because the environment I surround myself in is going to be conducive to my overall mental health and my ability to evolve. If I'm in a shit soup surrounded by shit people, I can't blame myself for not doing more than I can, because I'm trying to put in twice the level of energy to get the same results.
Right. If we want to maximize female benefit, it's really about being as selective and discerning as possible. And it's very hard to be selective and discerning when we're looking back instead of looking forward. And I think that's what we have to take away when we look at nostalgia
from this episode.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, right? Like when you look at the grand scheme of life, you have to like think about, well, am I making friendships and relationships with people who are holding me back from embracing the future, from holding me back from being able to move on? Because if the reality is that you're in this position where you're constantly ruminating on the past, and this person is also there with you, they're also like, oh, wasn't it so much better? You're depriving yourself of what can be.
Yes.
You're depriving yourself of like the potential for you to experience so much more, to have a much better life.
And, I've heard this before too, like when people talk about, why you should break up with him or whatever, it's like, well, he's occupying space and time and place that if he were not there would be freed up for a much better match to come in. So it's like, don't think about it as losing a boyfriend. Think about it as gaining, a much better version of what you need in your life somewhere down the line, right? Because if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But like, keeping this person in your life because they're already there, like what kind of rationale is that? It's for the weak and you're not weak. So again, I just think I loved this episode, Diana, because I think especially with the US, the current state of affairs in the US, it's such a shit show. And it's like we're seeing these really regressive, retrograde attitudes, surge in popularity. And I understand because, like life is really hard for so many and things are only getting more expensive. And, all of the things that make it seem really hopeless in the world, those are the forces that are trying to sell you on. If we just return to the past, everything will be better, right? Like eggs will be cheaper and women will take care of the family again. So we won't have broken families and men will be happier because they'll have families to look out for and to provide for. It's like, it's all a lie. It's all just marketing to harness these people's energies in ways that are destructive. And I think if we're going to have a chance, if we're going to have a shot at a future that we want for our children and our children's children and for this planet, like we have got to break away from this antiquated mentality and start really dreaming big and dreaming of a future that, where we break free of all of these chains of the past, because that's really ultimately what nostalgia is. At the end of the day, they're chains from the past. Won't you free yourself?
Oh, I love that. Nostalgia is a chain.
Yep.
Sympathy is a knife.
Chain of fools. That's what it is.
Yeah, nostalgia is a chain. But yeah, I mean, just wanted to add one last point before we close out for the day. But that's the thing, right? I think that people always attribute all of the good to the past. And they're like, oh my God, everything that's happening that was ever good was all in the past. Like, well, what we have right now is shit because of the past. You attribute all the good to the past. You forget the fact that like it's past actions that have compounded, that have resulted in our current reality. And it's like every step that you made in the past is what is resulting in what you have now. You know what I mean?
Damn, Diana. Damn.
This idea that it's like, oh yeah, just everything good exists in the past. And it's like this vacuum space that had no impact on your present reality. It's just so funny to me. It's like, oh yeah, like it's not like, oh, it's like, oh, it's so wonderful that women didn't have any human rights and just had to like cook and clean all day back in the past. It's like, yep. And if you're wondering why your so-called modern feminist girlfriend feels that way now, it's because of her grandmother that probably had to live through that. You know what I mean? Like she didn't hear about that. Like she didn't live through it. So obviously it's not through experience that she feels that way. But she heard about it through the experiences of people that she respects. And they were like, it's a shit deal. And some people learn through trial and error and experience. And some people learn through observation. And honestly, if you're able to avoid a lot of trauma through observation, you're doing all right.
You're doing all right. You're doing better than all right. Okay. You're saving yourself a lot of heartache and a lot of time. Oh my gosh. Diana.
Your powers of observation are saving you. So at the end of the day, leave the past, stay in the present, and look forward to the future. That's the main gist.
Boom. There it is. And scrotes continue to die mad.
Die mad. See you again. And also don't forget to follow us on our socials and listen to our Patreon episode. We have bonus episodes. We're going to get all this stuff back.
I want us to make t-shirts. Like we're on it now.
We're on it. But yes, please do listen to our bonus content. And as usual, give us feedback. We love to hear back from you. And have a nice week, everyone. Bye.
See you next week, Diana. Bye-bye.